Hello, good day. I am Kemuel Jan Salazar from BPED 2B. So for today's video, we're going to discuss about the content and contextual analysis of the selected primary sources in the Philippines. Let me tell you about the learning objective of the discussion. First is to familiarize oneself with the primary documents in different historical periods of the Philippines. Second is to learn history through primary sources. Third, to properly interpret primary sources through examining the content and context of the document. And lastly, to understand the context behind each selected document. The historian's primary tool of understanding and interpreting the past in the historical sources. Historical sources ascertain historical facts. Such facts are then analyzed and interpreted by the historian to weave historical narrative. Specifically, historian who studies certain historical subject and event needs to make use of various primary sources in order to weave the narrative. Primary sources are usually defined as first-hand information or data that is generated by witnesses or participants in past events. Primary sources are characterized not by their format but rather by the information they convey and their relationship to the research question. They include letters, diaries, journal, newspaper, photographs, and other immediate accounts. The interpretation and evaluation of these sources become the basis for research. There are two kinds of criticism in using primary sources. First one is the external criticism. Examine the authenticity of the document or the evidence being used. This is important in ensuring the primary source is not fabricated. Checking date of writing or date of producing the source, place of production, and the authorship. And the second is the internal criticism. Examine the truthfulness of the content of the evidence. However, this criticism requires not just an act establishing truthfulness and or accuracy but also the examination of the primary sources in terms of the context of its production. To check the credibility of the document whether the contents given it are believable or not. It is because many writers will not have adequate knowledge of the given situation. Some will write on the situation with motivation or prejudice. We have four primary sources of the Philippines. First one is the Antonio Pigafetta. Primary sources in writing the document is to discover and to learn more about the world. He was an Italian scholar and pilgrim from the Republic of Venice. The historian became exciting when they found the book that Antonio Pigafetta wrote, Magellan's Voyage. It is the English translation of his journal that was written on the voyage, 1519 to 1521, so made a great primary source. Second, the kataas-taasan, kagalang-galangan katipunan ng mga anak ng bayan, KKK. Katipunan is ostensibly the most imperative association that shaped Philippine history. While hostile for contrary developments, endeavors, and association had just been built and hundreds of years preceding the establishing of the Katipunan. It was just this association that imagined the accompanying. The Kartilya ng Katipunan is a set of principles that demonstrates how Filipinos should live their lives in accordance with high moral standards as well as a list of obligations and responsibilities. Kartilya ng Katipunan is a set of principles that shows the path on how each and every one of us must live or lives by living the fullest through good values. I believe that this Kartilya ng Katipunan was made to change the thoughts of every Filipino's unacceptable behavior. Third, political cartoons are vivid primary source that offer interviewing and entertaining insight in the public mood. the underlying cultural assumption of an age, an attitude towards key events or trends of the time. Since the 18th century political cartoons have offered a highly useful window into the past. Lastly, the Corazon Aquino's speech. The speech is part anti-Marcos propaganda, part seeking sympathy from listener, part asking for help from the US from the so-called damage caused by her predecessor, and part pandering to the American listeners. As to the anti-Marcos part, she talked about Marcos being a dictator, that Marcos trampled on the Philippine democracy and jailed thousands. As to seeking sympathy from her listener, she related her experience. She returned to the Philippines to bury her husband, former Senator Benigno Aquino Sr., who was assassinated at the Manila International Airport. She was trying to appeal to her American listener that she was an aggrieved widow. Her husband should not have come back after being warned by Marcos, and he was supposed to return to the Philippines after he got well from his heart surgery in Texas. But instead, he lingered and stayed for 2 years. He even went outside of the Philippines to meet with anti-Marcos elements and took a fellowship in one of the American universities. He decided to come back when Marcos became seriously ill in 1983. What is the importance of this discussion? The importance of this discussion, historical analysis is a method of examining of evidence in coming to an understanding of the past. It is particularly applied to evidence contained in documents, although it can be applied to all artifacts. The historian is first seeking to gain some certainty as to the fact of the past. Why do we need to use primary sources to study Philippine history? Primary sources are valuable to historians because they give insight into the ways in which historical figures are understood or internalize what they experience, their place or significance in history, and give historians an understanding of historical figures' opinions. That was my discussion all about. Again, I am Kemuel Jan Salazar from Bebe Tolby. Thank you for listening.